Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Odds and Ends here on Bet.NOLA.com, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. I'm Zach Ewing with Jim Derry and Devin Jackson here to wrap up the weekend in sports betting for you and to look ahead at the week to come. Guys, it's week 18 in the NFL, which they haven't had too many of before. They've never had a 17th game, and the Saints are still in it remarkably against all odds. So I guess that's our lead today.
Yeah, who would have thought that 4 weeks ago? I mean, 5-game losing streak. Talked about our indebtitude this morning. I mean, any realistic fan or realistic follower of the NFL wouldn't have realistically. How many times can I say realistically in 30 seconds? But say that
realistically, how many times can you fit?
Realistically, how many can I say it? But seriously, how many times do you think the Saints would be in this position at this point if they played it over 10 times, maybe twice? So yeah, they've done a really good job by keeping themselves relevant and having a chance, a very realistic chance of going into the playoffs. ESPN puts it at 38%. I put it more like 50 to 60%.
Yeah, I mean, they are. We'll talk more about this, obviously, but the two results they need to happen are both favored to happen in Vegas. They're 4.5-point favorites against Atlanta. And the Rams are 5.5-point favorites against the 49ers. If you take the money lines of those games and use implied probability, I figured it out at 47%. The Saints get what they need. Now, if you use the plus odds, if you use the underdogs odds, it'll actually be a little lower than that. But if you use the minus odds, you're at 47%. They get what they need. So, I mean, it's basically a coin flip. I think maybe 5% on either side of that. But the fact of the matter is, like you said, 4 weeks ago, I don't think anybody thought they would be there. And then, Devin, the other part of that is, if you go back and change, I mean, they have so many close losses. If you go back and they don't have a COVID outbreak against the Dolphins, let's say that, or they convert a 2-point conversion in Tennessee, or they beat the Giants in overtime at home after giving up a 10-point lead. I mean, they could very well be in a situation where all they need to do is beat Atlanta. So you can look at it both ways.
Yeah, I mean, you could even go back to the first Atlanta game. They had a chance to close that game out too, and didn't do that. So there's so many if this would have happened, if that would have happened. But it comes down to Sunday. They got to handle their business first before they worry about the 49ers and Rams and what's happening there. But if all goes to plan, they'll be in the playoffs by the end of Sunday.
Absolutely, and we'll talk plenty more about the NFL. We'll also talk college football. We've got LSU in its bowl game tomorrow night. And then, of course, a national championship matchup between Georgia and Alabama next Monday night. This is Odds and Ends, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. I'd like to remind you that you can sign up for the Caesar Sportsbook app by going to NOLA.com/Caesars. Get a $100 free bet bonus at launch, which we anticipate being this month, by the way. We're now in January. We anticipate the mobile betting portion of sports betting in Louisiana to go live in January. So very exciting news as far as that goes. And there may be more promos to come, so stay tuned. But for now, you can sign up and be ready to go. NOLA.com/Caesars. All right, the NFL weekend ends up, by the way, tonight, and this is a little bit of a dud of a Monday night game. I guess unless you're a Steelers fan and it's Big Ben's final home game, and the Steelers have a very minuscule chance of still making the playoffs. They would have to win this game, win next week, and have the Colts lose to the Jaguars, among other things. All sorts of stuff would have to happen. But they do technically have a chance. The Browns, on the other hand, are eliminated. This line has jumped the fence, by the way. The Browns were favored last week. Now that they're eliminated, we don't know what they'll do with starters and everything, but now it's the Steelers who are favored, Jim.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I mean, I really liked the Steelers last week when it was 3.5 at one point. Kind of aggravated with myself that I didn't take it then. I was so interested in a couple of the other lines. I did get the Packers at 6.5 and a couple other things that ended up turning out to be good. But look, this is Big Ben's last home game. I mean, so I think the Steelers should have been favored all along. I get once the Browns got eliminated that changed the thought process of Vegas, I guess. But to change it that much, kind of insane line switch there. Probably a no play for me, but I still would take the Steelers. I thought all along that Pittsburgh would win this game, and my thought process hasn't changed at all.
Usually when you see a line move that much on game day, somebody knows something. Like Baker said, look, I'm aching and we're out of it. Let me sit. Although I don't think Case Keenum.
But even then, Zach, money, even big money doesn't move a line 6 points. So there's got to be something else going on there. I mean, like the biggest bet you could think of, which wouldn't happen on a Browns-Steelers game, wouldn't move the line 6 points. No. So there's something else involved for sure. It's obviously I mean. The Browns were eliminated.
Yeah, a big bet, and somebody knows the Browns are eliminated, and somebody knows somebody's going to sit. I wouldn't even put Baker Mayfield over Case Keenum by more than a point or two anyway. So I don't think that's it anyway. Jerry says, "Good afternoon, Jerry. We appreciate you checking in. It was indeed a great win on Sunday, and from a Saints perspective, and I guess we've got to wrap this week up. Monday night." Devin, this is the problem. You can't flex these games that are already on another day. So we're kind of stuck tonight. I guess from a historical perspective, you like to see Big Ben go out on a high note.
Yeah, I mean, whenever, quarterbacks kind of have that final home game, and unfortunately for Drew Brees, he didn't exactly have the best final home game. But when you have things like this, usually it's a lot of fanfare, a lot of emotion. And it should be an emotional scene at Heinz Field. I would not be surprised if he had a vintage performance. This is a team that eliminated him from the playoffs last year, so he definitely has that on his mind. So I would expect him to come out and play really well, and in general, the Steelers to play well and still give him a chance to win. Now, they need the Jaguars to win next week for a chance to get in the playoffs, and that's probably not happening. But this will be a cool story tonight if he goes out and have a vintage performance.
Yeah, and I mean, look, are the Steelers going to make the playoffs? Almost certainly not. But in a professional's mind, as long as they still have a chance, they're going to go out and, they're going to give it their all, and they're going to give it a shot to get into Week 18. Then
you would expect nothing less from a Mike Tomlin team anyway.
No, that's true. That's true. And maybe you never know. I mean, I just read today the Colts have not won in Jacksonville since 2014. I mean, you've got to think that streak ends this week. But I mean, my God, it's been 8 years. Well, 7 years. They haven't won in they go down there every year. And Jacksonville they've had a couple of good teams in that time. But that's a stunning stat. And so maybe these other AFC teams have a chance. I don't know. I wouldn't give them much of when the Colts are 15.5-point favorites. But you never know.
Yeah, you never know. But yeah, but I mean. I would be, to me, there was some shocking upsets. The Detroit Cardinals come to mind. The Chargers losing to the Texans. We'll go down the line and we could pick a few more, but that to me would be top 3 shockers of the year.
Oh yeah, I mean it would be, and given the stakes, right? It would just be a shocker. There were a couple of surprises yesterday, not anything totally shocking. The Ravens were beating the Rams most of the day. The Bengals did not have a lead in that game until late, but they end up winning it. And then the Cardinals really controlled the Cowboys, and that's a result that actually helped out the Saints a lot because it means is the Rams are going to have to go all out to win on Sunday against the 49ers.
Yeah, again, another thing we talked about in Datitude, but to me, that was as important. I mean, obviously the Saints beating the Panthers were the most important thing as far as the Saints getting the playoffs. But of all the other things, and I almost include the Vikings losing, but you knew they were going to lose with all the COVID situations they had. To me, this was up there in importance because if the Cardinals don't win that game, I'm not sure how the Rams treat this game coming up this week. Sure, you want to be the 2 seed or the 3 seed, but at the same time, you don't want to get anybody hurt. And if you got a chance to be the division champion, you already know you're there. I'm not sure how much the Rams put into it. So that was a huge victory for the Saints yesterday.
Yeah, that was one they kind of needed that they didn't officially mathematically need, but they either needed that or they needed, and Washington was beating Philadelphia most of the day as well. They couldn't score any points in the second half, and then had the ball. Would they get down as far as about the 20-25 in the closing minutes and couldn't punch it in? That would have been huge also. But as it turns out, the Eagles are now in, and it's down to Saints or 49ers for the final spot in the NFC. The AFC, it's a little more complicated. The Colts have to win to get in. They lose, then Raiders and most likely if the Colts can win, it's Colts and whoever wins between Raiders and Chargers. But if all of a sudden the Colts lose, there's all sorts of different things that could happen. So lots of different permutations. even that 49ers-Texans game yesterday, the 49ers ended up covering a big spread, but that was a close game. It was 10-7 going into the fourth quarter. In fact, the Texans were winning that game at halftime. Devin, what did you take away from yesterday? Sorry, Jim.
I think for the most part that things that we expected to happen outside of like the Cardinals pretty much beating up the Cowboys. I think everything else kind of fell into place, although the Rams really had to push at the end there to beat the Ravens. But other than that, there wasn't too much that I was surprised with. I do want to give props to Joe Burrow and the Bengals. They have surprised everyone, and they went in and beat Kansas City, was down pretty big early, and now they're in AFC North champs and back in the playoffs 2 years removed from 2-14 records. So got to give them props. That was probably the best win yesterday in terms of the NFL's performance, and just once again, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase taking over a football game like we saw them at LSU. So they continue to put up big numbers and keep winning. And now, I mean, I know they have some holes on their team, but they become a dangerous team heading into the playoffs now.
Oh, yeah. And the Bengals haven't won a playoff game since before Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were born. I mean, it's been more than 20 years.
Lots of people were singing the Archbishop Rummel fight song yesterday with Jamar Chase. So I tell you what, if you and I know he won your fantasy championship for you, Zach. I heard the same thing last night at poker. I won without him. Luckily, I wasn't playing against him either. But anybody holding a Jamar Chase Rookie of the Year ticket was celebrating yesterday for sure.
Oh, and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Look, Jamar Chase is now the heavy favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's minus 250 at Caesars. Mac Jones, the only other player even on the board, the Patriots quarterback. And Joe Burrow now, not only has he almost caught Dak Prescott for comeback player of the year. I think Dak's like minus 140 still, and Burrow's right on his tail. But he's also the third choice for MVP. I mean, behind only Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. Now, I don't think Burrow will win it over Aaron Rodgers, but the fact is, I mean, a month ago, he wasn't even in the conversation.
I said yesterday to a friend, I would take Joe Burrow over if somebody offered me a ticket, Burrow or Brady. I still think it's going to be Rodgers anyway, but Burrow or Brady, I would take the Burrow ticket. I don't think people are going to vote for – I think there are fewer people that are going to vote for Brady, kind of the way they played the last month of the season. I get that they've had their issues since the Saints beat them to hell. But I just think that Burrow, the way that the Bengals are ascending and the Bucs are descending with a little help from Antonio Brown, I mean, I'd take the Burrow ticket over the Brady ticket right now.
But by the way,
Jonathan Taylor ticket.
And Cooper Kupp, I think, deserves some love too. I mean, the guy's having an incredible season, but he won't win it. By the way, anybody going to buy a ticket on Antonio Brown as next year's comeback player of the year?
I'm going to buy a ticket for him to be in a mental facility before he's on an NFL roster next year.
Your face is say it all. Your face. I have a friend saying, "Oh, hey, everybody deserves another chance." I said, "Another chance? How many chances do you get?"
Yeah, exactly.
How many chances do you get?
Well, Zach, it goes to show, Sean Payton has certain, I don't know if code is the right word, but you have to fit a mold to play for the Saints. And in very rare situations does he deviate from that mold. And I remember a few years ago when Antonio Brown departed from the Steelers and Saints fans all over the place were saying, they got to get Antonio Brown. It's never going to happen. It is never going to happen. Sean Payton would never sign Antonio Brown because you can believe in second and third chances, but once you get past that, that's enough. And
yeah, I mean, that's why it was maybe doubtful he was ever going to get Odell Beckham Jr. this year, although OBJ makes –
that's a little different, yeah.
He looks sane compared to Antonio Brown. So, I mean, that's – yeah. Of course, everybody does. Tyler says Saints in the Super Bowl –
could you see Zach? Could you see Devin losing the big bowl picks and the $1,000 bowl picks he loses on the last day, and he just ripped off his shirt on odds and ends and said, "I'm done with y'all." It's gonna happen.
I mean, I also saw, I mean, speaking of bad takes, someone compared it to Simone Biles and said, well, they both quit on their team. No.
Completely different.
No.
It's
You
not
don't
even
get to make that
close.
comparison. Besides
No
the fact
way.
that, I don't even
Let's
know where
not
to
even-
start with that.
Don't
But
even go there.
I mean, that was one of the more shocking things you've ever seen on an NFL field. To Tyler's point, Saints to the Super Bowl, they're 125-1. If you just wanted to put a ticket down, I will say this for the Saints' chances. We think they got a coin flip chance of getting in. If they get in, they would face the Rams. That's locked in because the Rams would get the 2 seed with a win, which the Saints need. So that's a tough first assignment. Obviously, Rams, very talented team. The Saints have had their full defense healthy and ready to go twice all season, and they have demolished 2 Super Bowl favorites, the Packers and the Bucs, in those 2 weeks. I'm not saying they're going to keep that up or that the defense will even ever get healthy again. PJ Williams was banged up yesterday. But, as far as long shots go, it's not impossible, right? I mean, that they could get on a run.
Yeah. I have the Bengals at 100. I have $1,500 on a $10 ticket, so I'll just hold on to that one and hope.
Yeah, you're probably better off doing that. Let's switch gears. You're watching Odds and Ends here on bet.nola.com, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. Let's switch gears and talk some college football. Lots and lots of bowl games over the last 5 days or so. And we'll start with some of the non-New Year's 6 games. So here's some of the results. Wisconsin beat Arizona State. That was interesting. That line was 7 most of the time, and so a lot of pushes on that ticket. Arizona State closed, though, +8. Wisconsin had the ball goal to go in the final minute and took knees. And so that was the Las Vegas Bowl, too. And so you got a bunch of Badger fans in the stands who were screaming at Jerry Kill, like, come on, man. Punch it in, kick a field goal, do something. But Arizona State ends up covering the closing line of +8. Purdue, Tennessee, that was going on while we were in studio for At the Book on Thursday. That was a wild one. Then you had the 2 games that were sort of makeshift matchups, Wake Forest, Rutgers, Central Michigan, Washington State. Central Michigan wins as a dog. And then on New Year's Day, a couple of good results finally for the SEC. Arkansas beating Penn State. Kentucky beats Iowa. Any takeaways here, guys? I mean, I know some of these lower tier bowl games, they're fun. It's hard to read a whole lot into them.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give credit to Arkansas. They've continued to win games against opponents you would think they would lose to. So they're building a really nice program at Arkansas, and I'm not saying they're going to be a contender anytime soon, but they're at least building towards a positive direction. And you got to give Sam Pittman some credit on that. And then Central Michigan, that's another big one. Jim McElwain, a former Florida coach, SEC coach as well, beating a Pac-12 school. That's another big win for a MAC program on short notice, playing Washington State. So those are kind of the 2 big takeaways for me. I wasn't a fan of Iowa most of the season, and Kentucky controlled that game for most of it. And Purdue played a shootout predictably against Tennessee. So wasn't too surprised about some of those results, but definitely Arkansas, Central Michigan, the biggest takeaways from the non New Year's 6 bowl games.
I'm going to say this too. Arkansas did a great job. Sam Pittman probably could be SEC Coach of the Year. I assume they'll give it to Kirby, or to Saban, I guess, since they won the title. But Pittman deserves it. They had a fantastic year. He built that program back faster than I thought they could. But having said all that, I am going to be fading the holy hell out of the Razorbacks next year. Win total under, all that kind of stuff. They had the most veteran team in the SEC, the most years of experience. They bring KJ Jefferson back, but they lose a bunch on the lines. And you play in the SEC West, when you drop off a little bit on the lines, you're going to get trounced. And so I think this, not to wish ill on any program, but this may be the pinnacle, at least for a couple more years before they can build that back up.
Suey Pig, baby.
Call him. No, if you're going to do it right, man.
Suey Pig.
Ooh, Pig.
I don't know.
No, they had a good year. They did. I just think in the SEC West, when you're competing with the Alabamas and the Auburns and the LSUs and the A&Ms, if you don't reload like those programs do, you have a year like this, and then you fall back, and you got to fight your way back. And the idea is when you do have the good year, they went 9-4, I think. You try to go 11-2 instead of 9-4, and you actually get somewhere. And they had close games. I mean, they lost to Ole Miss by 2 points or something. They played Alabama tough. If you win a couple of those games, then all of a sudden you've turned a special year into a year you'll never forget that goes down in school history. So,
what would Vanderbilt do for a year like this?
Vanderbilt, they build up toward 3-9 years, and then they fall back to 1-11.
Just think if they had an Arkansas type year, they wouldn't care what happened for the next 10 years, probably.
I mean, James Franklin, listen, he had a couple of good years. He might have won 9 games with Vandy one year.
Did.
And then he left. And then, so it can happen. New Year's Six Bowls, we started on Thursday night. Michigan State pulled away. They beat Pitt. Pitt was down to its third-string quarterback. Kenny Pickett opted out, and the backup got hurt. Then we had the semifinals. Those are the ones with the asterisks. Alabama they covered. It was almost like a systematic thing, just sort of slowly and steadily pulled away from Cincinnati. I know we had a couple of Cincinnati plus 14 tickets, and we're kind of hoping for that late backdoor push, if you will. Never happened. And then Michigan was never even positioned for that. They got blown out from the word go. And then elsewise, some good games on New Year's Day. Oklahoma State, Notre Dame, Ohio State beating Utah, probably the game of bowl season. And then Baylor, Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. Unfortunately, kind of a dud because Matt Corral goes out hurt in the first quarter, and Ole Miss offense just couldn't get it together after that. They threw a pick 6, and their offense gave up 7 and scored 7 the rest of the way. So that was never going to end well for them.
Yeah, the Ohio State-Utah game was definitely the best of bowl season. Probably the most entertaining game. It was like 5 touchdowns in like an 11 or 12 play stretch. So the over was hit by the first half. So it was insane to kind of watch that game, and definitely an entertaining one. Oklahoma State Notre Dame was pretty good too. Again, Notre Dame controlled most of the first half, and Oklahoma State roared back, and that was a game I predicted wrong because I thought it was going to be an under in that game. That similarly, pretty much, I think early in the third quarter that hit the over. So a lot of fun, high-scoring games. The college football playoff games were a little disappointing in terms of competitiveness. I do think Cincinnati did a good job hanging around, but Alabama just dominated them in the trenches, and they just kept going with it and kept running the football. Georgia just dominated both sides of the ball, and Michigan really didn't have a chance.
To Nick's point here, too, kind of a shaky debut for Marcus Freeman as a defensive coach to give up all those points in the second half. Although, again, it's one game. It's a bowl game. I don't think you make any long-lasting takeaways. I will say this for Cincinnati, and yes, they lost by 21 points, and people say, oh, the group of 5 doesn't deserve it. Number one, as everybody said, there were other teams, Power 5 teams, that get their brains beat in by Alabama every other year in the playoff. So that happens. And then, I mean, it was a 21-point game. Alabama muffed a punt in the second quarter when it was 10-3, I think. If Cincinnati falls on that thing, they have first and goal, a chance to tie the game. That's a different game at that point. All of us, I mean, Alabama really did not pass the ball. They only had 170 yards passing. They were able to run, and Cincinnati never really stopped it. They did a little bit better job toward the end of the game. But, that just goes to show you the games can kind of turn on. I'm not saying Alabama would have lost the game if they don't recover that punt, but I do think Cincinnati covers if they recover that punt, and the game goes into the fourth quarter with some doubt.
Here's the deal. Does it really matter who the fourth team was or the third team for that matter? I mean, Michigan were second ranked, but only because Georgia lost in the SEC championship game, and it was a political thing. I mean, no one in their right mind thinks that anyone but Alabama and Georgia belongs. I mean, this is one where you could have had 2 teams, although Georgia probably would have got hosed. So the playoff benefited that the 2 best teams ended up getting in the championship game. But it doesn't matter who the fourth team was. I'm glad Cincinnati got in because they deserved it. They earned it, and I didn't know if they would give it to them. They had to in the end. But you could have put Notre Dame there. You could have put Oklahoma State there. You could have put Ohio State there. I mean, Ohio State probably would have made a better game of it than maybe anyone else. But, I mean, Georgia just showed that Michigan, they could play that game 10 times. Georgia's going to win it 10 times. Alabama can play Cincinnati 10 times. They're going to win it at least 9 times. It doesn't matter. The 2 best teams are in the championship, and it's not close.
Well, and I think to your point, we talked about this on Thursday. If it had been a two-team system, I think Georgia plays the SEC championship game differently. Not
Oh,
to
yeah, I
say they
agree.
weren't, yeah, not to say they weren't trying to win that
Sure.
game, but once they fell behind, and they weren't going to pull all their tricks out of the bag, so to speak, knowing that hey, there's a pretty good chance, better than half chance, we're going to see these guys again if we lose this game. And so let's go ahead. They wanted to knock them off and kill the monster right then and there. But once that didn't happen, it's like, well, let's not empty the chamber here and give these guys everything we've got when we're going to see them again a month from now, and we'll see, and we'll talk about that.
But
In fact,
before we move on real quick, I want to say, Zach, I think this season has changed my mind on expanded playoffs. I mean, I was all gung ho about 16 teams or whatever. I don't know. I'm starting to think that 4 is enough because I mean if you do it, you got to do it 12 because you can't have one play 16. That'd be a farce. I mean, what would I don't even know who the 16th best team is. Iowa. What would Alabama do to Iowa? What would Georgia do to Iowa? I don't know. But I mean, it's just I think there's enough teams now. I mean, they're going to have to do something to change my mind. Not that it matters. I don't have a say so. But I've completely switched and flipped on this in the last couple of years on how many teams should be in the playoffs. Because certainly this year, no more than 4 deserve to be in there.
I mean, listen, if you're talking about deserving, college football has the least parity of any sport by far.
No doubt.
Outside of some European soccer leagues where Bayern Munich wins the German title every single year. But like, if we're talking about deserving, no. But I will say that if you expand playoffs, what happens is, let's say we go to 12. Well, number one, you're going to have some exciting first round games that mean a hell of a lot more than the Gator Bowl means. Texas A&M is not going to back out of a first round playoff game like they did the Gator Bowl. I don't care how many
kids
guys
won't opt out, probably.
Right. So you get that. You get more good games. And then number two, okay, 12 teams. So Alabama and Georgia have buys in that situation. They still have to play one extra game. And that means that they're putting themselves at risk one more time for a muffed punt to come up to bounce the wrong way. For a kid to have a terrible game and throw 3 interceptions. For Alabama lost to Texas A&M this year. I mean, could they lose to somebody similar to that again? Yes. I mean, I'm not saying it would happen, but you have at least a 25% chance of it happening. And now instead of one semifinal game to get to the championship game, they've got to play twice. And it just sort of increases that risk that something silly happens. And just like in March Madness, if you only had 4 teams, you'd have Gonzaga against Duke or Kansas in the final every year. And people would say, well, we don't need to expand it because we know who the best teams are. Well, you do. But if you put these teams at risk 4 or 5 times, the best teams start losing and it becomes more unpredictable. So
I get your point, but it would be a great moneymaker. They're going to do it someday, and it's probably someday soon. But to me, you could take the top 4 teams in the SEC and let them all battle it out. To me, there's your national championship because most 8 times out of 10, that's what it's going to be. The best 4 teams in the SEC are the best 4 teams in the country.
Devin, I'm curious, what's your perfect number of playoff teams?
I think I'm fine with 4, to be honest. I think, once you start expanding to 8, 12, maybe 16, I think then you have to start manipulating like the regular season. So then all of a sudden the non-conference games, like at the beginning of the season, they don't matter anymore because teams are scheduling smaller schools. So I think it's kind of a domino effect where once you expand it, then all of a sudden the regular season doesn't mean as much anymore. And then all of a sudden you see teams like Alabama, Clemson, the bigger teams, we see them start to play some of these bigger schools. Like I know Alabama is running through everybody, but they played played Miami, they played Wisconsin, like Penn State a decade ago. So you want to see games still like that in the regular season where there's something to play for, like Oregon, Ohio State. And I feel like if you expand it, then all of a sudden you're kind of taking that away. And then essentially you're going to have a bunch of these teams that are essentially untested during the regular season. And then all of a sudden you may get the same situation that you get here where the same teams are still rising to the top. And then every, 4 or 5 years, maybe someone knocks them off. So I think right now 4 is the answer per se, because I think now that they've let a group of 5 school in, I know that maybe they won't be as willing maybe in the future, but they seem that they can be in the game at the very least and not get blown out the entire time. I think that was helpful to keeping the 14 playoff the way it is. But I think expanding it, I mean, in theory, it's a good idea. But I think when you look at the state of college football right now, I don't think there's really 8 teams that can play for a national championship at this very moment.
I actually disagree with one thing you said, Devin, and that's that an expanded playoffs would force teams to dumb down their non-conference schedule, because I actually think it's the opposite. I think teams would beef it up knowing that there are 5 at-large spots available, or whatever it is. If we say, okay, there's 5 automatic berths for the Power 5 plus 1 for the Group of 5 and then 6 at-larges, all of a sudden these teams, just like in basketball, would be saying if we schedule tough, we can go 9-3 and still get in the play. And then if we get if we lose all 4 of our non-conference games, we still have a path to get there by winning the conference title. So all is not lost. So I mean, not that I expect teams to go out and schedule Murderers Row or anything, but I don't think all of a sudden you'd see teams playing 4 Sun Belt teams in September. I mean, I really don't think that would be an outcome. Now, again, the discussion we're having here is, do teams deserve to make it, or are we just going to let more teams in to increase the parity factor? Because if you're just talking deserving, then no, like you said, Jim, it's Alabama and Georgia, and most years it's going to be Alabama and Georgia, Alabama and Clemson, LSU and maybe an Oklahoma gets in there, or a USC now that Lincoln Riley's out there. So if we're just talking deserving, well, the basketball tournament's not. You can't tell me that the 63rd team is deserving. They're not. They lost 12 games.
They could play 3 games in a week in basketball. You don't play 1 in a week in football. It's another thing. You can't extend this season much longer than it's extended already. You don't want college football players. I had this argument on social media. Why? I don't know, because it's like banging your head against the wall when you argue on social media. But college kids shouldn't be playing that many games as it is. I mean, we forget why they're there. They're there to – I mean, obviously the NCAA doesn't care whether they make A's or D's as long as they scrape by enough to play in their precious $1 million football game. But they're there to go to school. And I mean, and 99% of these kids are, when they're done with college football, they're going off to be accountants and lawyers and doctors and construction workers and whatever the heck it is. And they need to go to school. And so putting this pressure on these kids for 4 years, I mean, you're talking about, it's hard enough during a semester and for them to take exams and all the things that they have to do throughout a school year. To add 2 more games to their schedule, I don't think is fair to them.
No, that's legitimate. That's a legitimate concern, and I don't know if the answer is you take away a non-conference game to where you only play 3 now, but then schools that don't make the playoff now only have 11 games, and you're causing communities to lose home games and all the revenue that comes with that. And so I don't know what the answer is. I do think we probably all agree that it's inevitable it will expand at some point, whether it's to 6 or 8 or 12 or 16 or whatever it is.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it will happen whether we agree with it or not. This year's championship, done under the 4-team system, of course, is next Monday. And we'll talk more about this just briefly. Your opening reaction to this line: Georgia was favored by 6.5 in the SEC title game. Alabama wins outright. This one opened at Georgia minus 2.5 and has now ticked up to 3. Jim, are you on the Dogs or the Tide?
Oh, this is an easy one for me. I mean, we've talked about this off the air, and I think I've made it clear elsewhere. I think that Georgia was as vanilla as they possibly could have been in the SEC championship game. Again, I don't think they were trying to lose the game on purpose. But at the same time, I don't think they were that concerned whether they lost the game. And I'm not talking about the players. I'm talking about the coaching staff and getting things together in the game plan. So they weren't going to show anybody anything that they didn't want to save for later. They didn't need to show much in the Michigan game. And to me, for a spread to change from 6.5 to 3 from one game to another means you're getting a really good value. And besides all that, I think that every casual bettor on the planet that isn't a Bulldogs fan is going to be betting on Alabama in this game. And I'm certainly fading the public in this one. I love Georgia. I think Georgia's going to win by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, I know. I agree with a lot of what you said. I think, again, a month ago, this line was 6.5. What has really changed? Yes, Alabama beat them. Yes, they looked a lot better in their last 2 games than they did the 3 games before that. But the personnel is the same. The coaches are the same. And again, if anything, Georgia probably did not show their entire arsenal, so to speak, in that SEC title game. And so why are they 3.5 point less favorites? And by the way, you're completely right about that. I'm trying to look it up. Caesars gave us some early trends on this game, and 60+% of the bets are on Alabama, but 60+% of the money is on Georgia. And so that's the old telltale sign that the people betting on Georgia are the ones who are really putting the money on the line.
Yeah,
Devin,
and,
go ahead,
Devin. I was going to say Devin can account to this as well, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think he feels the same way we do. And Devin, you can tell. I mean, when you play in a game, when you know there's a good chance that you're going to play a team again, you don't want to show the whole book, do you?
Nah, when you kind of obviously the game plan, you have the game plan set and ready to go, but kind of their situation, once you're down by a couple scores, what's the point of throwing more things out there that you can put on film and all of a sudden they can prepare for? So I would not be surprised if Georgia came with a much better plan. If you think about it, George Pickens, the Georgia receiver, that was his first game back in the SEC Championship game. Now he's got another game of reps in, and now he is presumably fully healthy. I think that's going to be a big factor, because even though Cincinnati struggled, they had some chances to exploit the Alabama secondary. And we saw the game that Alabama lost this year against Texas A&M. You can throw the football over them. You just got to be able to protect. And what Georgia did against two of the best pass rushers in Michigan, with Hutchinson and David Ajabo, they were able to neutralize them. So now that game against Michigan, I feel like that gives them more confidence going up against Alabama, because now you played against a defense that relies on pass rush. Alabama does as well. Now you're prepared for it, and now you can find ways to exploit that secondary. So I feel a little bit more confident placing a bet on Georgia this time around. Just knowing that beating a team twice in the season is difficult, and beating them with within a month of each other is even more difficult. So I think Georgia has an edge here.
Zach, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
I have a question. After something that Devin touched on kind of struck me with Alabama being so physical up front, and how much does Desmond Ritter's stock fall after? I mean, he had 4 batted passes, and he just looked a little. The lights got to him a little bit. I'm wondering if his stock falls at all after that.
This bowl season wasn't real good for quarterback prospects across the board. I think you're right on Ritter. Sam Howell didn't look very good for North Carolina. He had a bad season. I mean, he would have been a top 10 pick if he came out last year. And this year, I don't even know if he's a first rounder anymore. I mean, he's really hurt his stock. Matt Corral gets hurt. Matt Corral's probably my favorite quarterback prospect of this class, but I still don't know that he's a surefire NFL starter. I mean, it's a low bar right now. By the way, it's actually even more extreme than I thought. 73% of the tickets at Caesars Sportsbook, this is nationally, are on Alabama, but 80% of the money is on Georgia. That could change, obviously, in the next week, but that's a big
That'll
spread.
be 90% of the tickets on Alabama by game day. I'd bet that right now. I would bet someone right now that 90% of the tickets by game day are in Alabama.
People going to Vegas or New Orleans for the weekend, going to the casino next weekend, are going to make those bets, and those are the $5 and $10 bets, where the sharp guys are going to be putting thousands of dollars down on Georgia, and that's how you get those numbers. They're not always right. I mean, the sharps were on Cincinnati against Alabama, and they were wrong. So they're not always right, but I do think that that's the way this is trending. Bowl season outside of the national championship wraps up tomorrow, and it's the hometown team LSU taking on K-State in the Texas Bowl in Houston. Let's talk about this for a few minutes here on Odds and Ends. And this line, speaking of lines moving a lot, it was LSU minus 3.5 or 2.5 to start. It moved very quickly once it became known that Max Johnson wasn't going to play for LSU, and they were going to be down to Garrett Nussmeier or nobody at quarterback, which is the case because they're not going to burn Nussmeier's red shirt. It became K-State. It became K-State minus 3.5. And then today we found out news, LSU's down to like 40 to 45 scholarship players. I mean, it's not just a quarterback. They don't have much of anybody ready to go. And by the way, we are about one or couple more positive COVID tests overnight away from this game not being played at all, I think. I think there's a legitimate chance of that happening. But the line has gone even it had already moved from LSU -2.5 to K-State -3.5, which is where it sat most of the last week of 2021. In the past couple of days, it's moved up 2.5 more points, 3.5 more points now. K-State laying a full touchdown.
We need it to be played because we need LSU to either win or win by more than 3.5 or lose. And then Georgia wins the national championship, and your bowl regatta pick is golden, baby.
I'm all for that, man. Come on, LSU play. Show
Out
up.
of 500 and some odd picks, you're number 14 right now, and we need you to move up the charts.
Show up, but don't show up.
Exactly.
There was some question, and this may have been the reason why LSU was favored to begin with. There was some question in this game as to whether Skylar Thompson would play. That's K-State's quarterback. He was injured, but he is apparently ready to go. And so that may be why this line is where it is. Not to mention LSU's depth's hurt everywhere. But Jim, as someone who saw Jontre Kirkland play quarterback in high school, he's dangerous if that's who they go with.
Very.
I mean, they could win this game.
Very dangerous. The only thing that scares me is he hasn't played quarterback in 3 years. So I don't know, and he certainly hasn't done it at a college level. But yeah, he is a dynamic football player, and he can make some things happen. But the problem is, who's he going to have in front of him, and who's he going to be able to throw to? Who's he going to hand it off to? That's a major issue, and I'm with you. I have a feeling that this game is not going to be played.
I mean, the Holiday Bowl between UCLA and NC State was canceled 4 hours before the game. So I think that's about as late as you would hear about it. But it's an 8 p.m. game tomorrow night. If we're still on by this time tomorrow, I think we're good. But I could see LSU getting some bad news in the morning and them saying, look, sorry, we can't play. And teams are more willing to do that when they think they're going to lose. And LSU, like you said, Jontre Kirkland may be uber talented, and he may give anybody problems because they don't have tape.
It's fun to watch.
But if the offensive line's in shambles, I don't care if Drew Brees is playing quarterback. He's going to be in trouble, especially a mobile quarterback.
Saw it with Ian Book last week.
Yeah, well, I think that was a multitude of problems. But yes, I mean he didn't have a chance to do anything. Devin, what say you on the Texas Bowl?
I will say I have a feeling if this game is played, it's going to be a very wacky game. I think it's going to turn into one of those track meet games because both teams are unprepared for what's about to happen. And I will bring up that Kentucky did win a multitude of games with Lynn Bowden at quarterback a while back, a couple years ago. So it's possible for teams, and especially in SEC, to win games with receivers at quarterback. So it's not impossible. It's not like it hasn't been done before. And even going back like 10 or so years ago when Darren McFadden was playing with Arkansas, they ran the wild hog to the end of time. So I would not be surprised LSU came out swinging this game and through all types of trick plays, all types of fun things. And I may take LSU to cover the spread. I really do think they're going to play really hard, even if they have 40 or so players. But I do worry about if the game gets going, it's a high tempo game that they could suffer some more injuries and then all of a sudden they're handicapped. So that would be the one thing I worry about.
Yeah, I mean, they are right on the brink, I think, of having to pull out of this thing. And so we all hope that doesn't happen. It'd be fun. It's a night when there's not a whole lot else going on in sports. It'd just be a great thing to have out there. But that's the situation we're in. So we will start talking more basketball on this show, by the way. And the Pelicans play tonight. They're at home against the Jazz, 10-point underdogs at home. Jonas Valanciunas supposedly is going to play. He's off of the COVID list. Don't know how much he'll play but even before he was on the COVID list, he missed some games with illness. So who knows? And Brandon Ingram is questionable. Obviously, Zion's not playing. The Pelicans have it's like their next door neighbors, man. They have had problem after problem after problem, just like the Saints, in just having a full roster out there or anything close to it.
This is their most brutal stretch, maybe of the season as well. I mean, they play the Bucks, they play the Suns and the Jazz back to back, maybe without BI. And you just, look, I will say this. Willie Green has got them playing as well as they can play. I mean,
they play hard, man.
They do. They don't quit. They keep coming at you. They're like that pesky little, brother that won't keep gnawing at, get away from me, you know, that kind of thing.
I was wondering what noun you were going to come up with.
No, I was having to stop myself there for a minute. But they're fun. I like them. They're fun. I didn't, you know, the first few weeks were brutal. And I think you and I talked about this when we went to the game a couple weeks ago in Portland. And we talked about how I think once they got the news that Zion is going to be gone for a long time, maybe all season, I think they loosened up and said, okay, we don't have to talk about that anymore. We don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think maybe Willie Green told them the same thing. And they've been a different team since then. And they certainly won a lot more games than they were winning before the question of Zion kind of hung over their head. So just go out and play basketball, boys. And they're doing a great job at it. And I appreciate it and enjoy it.
Yeah, no, they're fun to watch and they play hard. Also, a couple of big college games this week in Baton Rouge. LSU men play Kentucky tomorrow, I believe, at the PMAC. And then on Thursday, it's the women against number 1 South Carolina. And the women's team, Kim Mulkey, already making her mark. What's
South
that?
Carolina's gonna be mad.
They just lost to the old alma mater, Old Mizzou, last week. So they'll be mad. But LSU, I mean, listen, man, Kim Mulkey's got them playing. They beat Texas A&M on Sunday, so they're 2-0 in the SEC as well. It's a pretty big game. So lots of good basketball to come up. You know, and we'll talk more and more about that here on bet.nola.com as we get into the new year. But for now, we want to end today's show, end odds and ends, with a look ahead at next week's NFL. It's week 18 in the NFL. There has been, I've seen this a couple times, and it bothers me because I'm a copy editor at heart. People say, oh, the NFL's first ever week 18. It is not the first ever week 18. They had, 3 seasons where they had 2 bye weeks, and so there were 18 weeks back in the early 90s. Jim, you'd probably remember better than I do.
You know, I completely forgot about that.
I know.
I really
90,
did.
91, 92, 93, maybe. They had 2 bye weeks, and so there were week 18s. But it is the first time that there will be a 17th game. I actually think eventually what the NFL will do is go to 18 games over 20 weeks. That they'll negotiate an extra game, but they'll give the players an extra week off, and that's what we'll end up with, because the schedule will work better that way. And anyway, that's neither here nor there. This week's lines, again, Saints and Rams both favored. Those are the 2 games the Saints need to sneak into the playoffs, and then they would turn around and face the team that helped them in the Rams if they got in. We talked about the Colts, 15.5-point favorites, but it's been 7 seasons since they won a game in Jacksonville. Patriots need to win and have the Bills lose to the Jets. Good luck with that to win the AFC East. I don't understand the flex schedules. Chargers, Raiders, obviously, because that's probably going to be a play-in game. That's going to be a great Sunday night game. I don't understand the games they've moved to Saturday. Cowboys, Eagles really doesn't mean much. I think the Cowboys, they could be the 3 seed or the 4 seed.
Right, it means nothing.
I mean, okay, well, maybe you get an extra home game.
They did that way because here's the deal. They tried to take the 2 games that had some kind of meaning at all. I completely understand it. I'm not trying to be confrontational or anything. They take the 2 teams that still have 4 teams that still have a little something to play for, or the 2 games, but they want all the teams that are kind of playing against each other, Saints and Falcons, and then 49ers, Rams. They want them to be playing all at the same time. So they're not necessarily – they don't already know what happened. So it doesn't take – in other words, if the Saints were playing at noon and the Saints lost, then the 49ers wouldn't have anything to play for, and it changes everything. So I think they're trying to do the groupings, and they've actually done a good job of this over the past few years in the final week, where the teams that matter and have to watch other teams are all playing at the same time, so it doesn't change, whether it be Vegas or whatever the reasons be, or make it more intriguing. I think that's why they do it, and I actually appreciate that.
Yeah, and last year was an exception. That last Sunday night game was a farce between Washington and Philadelphia because
for sure.
the Eagles ended up literally trying to lose that game, and it ended up costing the Cowboys a playoff spot. I guess I understand that you don't want to have a game that turns another game into either a meaningless game, or let's say the Saints played Saturday and lost. Then all of a sudden the 49ers are resting starters, and that hands the NFC West to the Cardinals. I mean, to the Rams, and pisses off the Cardinals. So I do understand that. I would have liked to see, okay, they did Chiefs-Broncos as the early game. Maybe you then do Titans-Texans as the late game, and you settle the AFC bye on Saturday or something. Because you're already going to be in a situation.
Because nobody's going to want to watch the Texans in prime time.
Yeah. I guess that's fair. Devin, we got to get a light on you. You're like disappearing on us there in the shadow. It's like I'm at home.
It was like you a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right. The sun's going down, and all of a sudden there's no light. What sticks out to you here, and any possible upsets you see brewing?
I will say the Chargers-Raiders game is interesting because somehow the Raiders are still have a chance to make the playoffs despite everything that's happened to them this year. And then I think they had a player arrested earlier today with a DUI. So that game, the Raiders organization somehow is still in contention for the playoffs despite everything that's happened. But that should be an interesting game. I'm kind of interested to see if the Colts cover that large spread. It just feels like 15.5 is a lot for a Colts team that's been winning by like one score on most of the games they've been playing in lately. So that'll be the line that I'll be watching in this one. But the rest of the games on this board, I mean, obviously the 49ers and Rams is pretty important, but I just don't think the Dolphins really beat the Patriots. They have not much to play for, and they need a lot to happen for them to get in the playoffs. So
No, I think they're out. Actually, they're
out.
done.
Yeah, they're done.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't see the Dolphins playing for anything really. So that I don't think any of these other games really intrigue me too much. But definitely the Chargers and Raiders, I think, has the potential to be the best of the weekend.
Jim, I'm curious when you write your picks here. Devin mentioned it. Those big spreads are tricky because on one hand, yeah, that's a ton of points in an NFL game. On the other hand, the Jaguars also know if they lose, they're the number one pick. Not saying they're going to lose on purpose, but if you get to halftime and you're down 17-6, are you coming out with a lot of fire in the second half at that point? Same thing with Bills and Jets, which I think is 17.5. Like if if you're down 10 at half, that might be it.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough not to be square this weekend. And for those of you who are new to betting, what I mean by that is it's going to be tough not to bet with the same thing that the public's going to bet on. Because I used to have a golden rule that I would very rarely, maybe a few times a year, take a division, take an underdog, take a favorite in a road playoff game. I mean, a road division game. I'll spit it out eventually. Trust me. In other words, like the Saints this week playing at the Falcons in their favorite. I would almost always take the Falcons here because a home dog division game used to cover about 80% of the time. But it's not that way anymore because the home field advantage doesn't mean as much. And so when you look at these lines, I mean, some of these things are like seem like they're super obvious to me. They're not going to, I mean, it's like Devin just said. On the surface, it looks like the Patriots should just wax the Dolphins. But traditionally, over the past decade plus, I mean, Bill Belichick has had a problem with the Dolphins for some unknown reason. And Brian Flores is an outstanding coach he's not going to go out with a whimper. It doesn't matter to him that this doesn't make a difference, whether they go to the playoffs or not. And they're certainly not thinking about whether they're going to pick 13th or 16th. They could care less. So the Dolphins are going to come out and play this game, and they're going to want to knock the Patriots down a notch. So it's going to depend on certain games. I think it's going to be tough to take the Jaguars. It really is. I mean, I know that's a lot of points, but just watching the way they played last week, they don't give a hoot. And Trevor Lawrence is awful. I don't know if he's getting better. So there are some things
in there quick.
They really do. And they need to get an offensive coach in there really quick. Yeah. So I don't know. It's going to be a tough one. I'm going to have to go through and handicap like I would normally handicap it. You can't just look at, usually to me, defensive ranks against offensive ranks and how they play as of late makes a lot of difference to me. There's a whole added element this week in the playoff scenario and what are teams playing for? Is this team that's out of it more likely to just quit and not care than this other team? It's kind of like picking a bowl game, right? We don't know who's going to have initiative and who's not going to have initiative. There are some teams that are not going to care about their draft slot, and there are other teams that are going to go out there and just lay an egg. And I think, and this is early, but to me, the Saints are in a great spot here because not only are the Falcons out of the playoffs now, but if you look at the difference between what the second team in the NFC South is going to have to play next year opposed to the third team in the NFC South, it's a major difference. You're talking about having to play Minnesota or Chicago, and you're talking about having to play Philadelphia or the football team. I mean, that's a pretty big difference in my opinion. So especially for the Saints, because the Saints, they don't match up well with Philadelphia, and they haven't played Minnesota well the last few times they played them, except at the end of the regular season last year, the year before last. But it's a big difference. I think Atlanta is very likely to go down and say, we don't care. So the Saints are in a good boat, but I don't know. The Colts are in a good shape too, because I don't think Jacksonville is going to win this game at all.
Yeah, and by the way, I believe that the second or third place also has to do with the AFC North, so it could be like Ravens or Steelers right now. Steelers with a new quarterback and everything, like that's going to be the easier game.
Right.
So
yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I take that back. They play all those teams. It's the AFC West.
Yeah, they play right.
Second and third. Yeah, it's the AFC West, I believe.
Okay.
Match up with but okay,
so Chargers or Raiders, that doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
But anyway, I get what you're saying. I think on some level the Falcons would love to end the Saints season, but again, that all changes when you get hit in the mouth a couple of times. Like last night's game, perfect example. The Vikings plus 12.5 seemed like a pretty good bet, even without Kirk Cousins, because it's like, hey, their playoff lives are on the line. They're going to come out and play hard. Well, and it was only 3-0 after the first quarter. But at some point, when you're repeatedly going up against a team that's better than you and is motivated, you just like everybody's got a limit to how hard they're going to play.
Aaron Rodgers flipped the switch. It was lights out.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Devin, final thoughts on this Monday.
It's kind of sad this end of bowl season already. I feel like we blinked and then all of a sudden it was over. But looking forward to some NFL playoff action, and we should get some interesting matchups in the playoffs. I'm looking forward to, especially the AFC. We can get a lot of good matchups over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and at this time next week, we'll be talking national championship, and we'll have NFL playoff matchups. It'll be a good odds and ends next Monday. But first, Jim, we hopefully got LSU playing tomorrow night in the Texas Bowl. We hope, we knock on wood, that they'll be able to have enough players to show up and play. And then we have, of course, big NFL weekend Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, to me, it may sound strange to say. I don't mean this the wrong way, but it's almost a good thing that we've had all this COVID issues the past few weeks, because it seems to me that.
I'm just kidding.
Excuse me?
I said I'm muting you.
Oh, you're muting me.
Yeah, you can't say it was a good thing.
No. Here's what I mean by that. Everyone's gonna get it eventually, right? And the fact, what I mean by it, and I don't mean it in a bad way. I don't mean that it's good to get COVID. Don't take that the wrong way. But as far as the games go, I think you're going to see less and less of this as we go forward. I think it's going to affect teams far less in the playoffs than maybe we were all worried about just 2 weeks ago. Even I know we talked about it on odds and ends a couple of weeks ago that this was not going to end, but I think so many players have had it now. I mean, you think about the list of players just on the Saints that have had COVID. I think they're probably in a good position now to where they don't have to worry about it nearly as much. Of course, you have to worry about it. And of course, there's still players that haven't gotten it yet. But the fact that so many players have had it and got over it, and I think that part of it is a good thing. And Amy just talked about how the players that she talked to almost everyone on the Saints that has had COVID so far, and all of them have had either no symptoms or they've had very mild symptoms.
Yeah, and the other, I mean, it's automatic. I think if you test positive, you don't have to test again for 90 days. So everybody who tested positive in the last couple of weeks is out of the woods, and that's
right.
That's where I was thinking about this earlier today, and I agree with you. And maybe it's a good place to end the show. I'd be worried if I was an NFL playoff team and I hadn't had an outbreak yet.
That's right,
because it seems like it's coming for everybody, right? Omicron's coming for everybody. Now the protocols are a little bit different. We saw Carson Wentz get back quickly this week. But if you're like, I don't think the Rams have really had a problem, for instance.
Bills?
What if the Rams have an outbreak all of a sudden before next week's game? Now, hopefully, for the Saints' sake, it doesn't happen this week. But it could. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like you're playing roulette almost. And what it means is, if you go into the playoffs as a 7 seed, like the Saints could, you got a shot because you don't know exactly who you're going to be playing. And the Saints have already had their outbreak. Everybody's in their 90-day window. They're good to go for the rest of the season, pretty much. And we'll see what happens if they can get the full.
You don't wish it on anyone, but it's certainly a possibility.
You can't ignore
something like that could happen for sure.
You cannot ignore it. All right, go to NOLA.com/Caesars. Sign up for the promo. Get the bonus. And we will see you tomorrow for the Fantasy Roundup live at 3:30. We'll wrap up fantasy football season. Raise your hand if you won a championship this year. Raise your hand, Jim. You won one. Yeah. And I think Spencer the Guru won a couple as well. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Devin, you win fantasy football this year?
No, I did. I came in third.
Oh, all right. Well, you won yesterday. Okay, we'll take that. And then on Thursday, we will be back for it at the book.
By the way, tell the Guru, I'm a little perturbed. I won, but I asked him for advice. Who should I start, Jalen Hurts or Russell Wilson? And I took his advice. It didn't cost me the title, but it came close.
All right, we have a bone to pick with the Guru tomorrow. Then we have a bone to pick with him. And then Thursday at the book, 4:00, we will talk about the NFL weekend and the national championship game, and some, as I promised, get some more basketball involved as well. Talk some LSU and Pelicans. For Devin Jackson and Jim Derry. Oh, and listen to Datitude, too. You had Amy Just on this morning. If you want more in-depth Saints talk, listen to Datitude on bet.nola.com. So for Jim Derry and Devin Jackson, I'm Zach Ewing. Have a good day.